I'm 11 years old. I'm alone on a Santa Fe train going from Chicago to California to stay with my grandma for the summer. It is the summer after my dad dies of a massive heart attack at work. There's a white guy across the aisle with those square salesman's cases at his feet. He says something to me in Japanese. He looks like that sleazy con man in The Music Man, Harold Hill. He looks me over. Ikura desu ka? I don't speak Japanese. I'm not supposed to talk to strangers on the train. I smile at the guy anyway, even though I have no idea what he's talking about. I don't like it when people speak to me in Japanese. It shows they don't know me. I ignore him, look out the window. Ikura desu ka? He keeps saying that to me during the entire trip. When I run into him between cars, on the way to the bathroom, in the dining car, is he following me? Ikura desu ka? Ikura desu ka? Ikura desu ka? After 3 long days, the train finally pulls into the station. I squint out the window looking for Grandma. It's foggy. I'm overjoyed to see her waiting for me with a taxi. I grab my stuff and rush up to her. Grandma, Grandma, what does Ikura desu ka mean? Her face suddenly turns mean. She's furious. Who said that to you? A man in the train. Which man? I look up, and just then I see the guy coming down the steps hauling his suitcases off the train. That man! There he is! I point him out. Grandma leaves my side and rushes over to the man, and I can see him yelling her head off at him, right in front of the conductor. I see her hit him with her handbag. You know, one of those big, black, double-handed grandma bags? Wham! Wham! The guy cowers. He's holding his suitcases. The man cowers as her heavy handbag whams him. She comes back to me and pulls me into her taxi. We whisk away to a nice, cozy, safe little bungalow on C Street. When I finally get back home to Chicago in the fall, I ask Mom what the words mean. Wow, that was quite a trip. You're grown up now. That man got off easy. I would have hurt him worse. A lot worse. Ikura desu ka means, how much do you want in Japanese? Oh, I see, I say, but I don't see at 11 years old. I still don't have a clue why Grandma hit that guy. But in that moment, a seed was planted inside of me that still grows in my bones. Grandma was fierce. I want to be like that. I want to be just like her, a woman warrior. Another story begins with a train before I was born. My mom, Lily Ota, I call her Lily-O. It's 1942, and she and her mom, Grandma, are getting on a train in Fresno, California, because our U.S. government has ordered all Japanese Americans to board trains and travel to who knows where. U.S. citizens, old people, children, teenagers, guarded by American soldiers with rifles. Get on that train! Get moving! Where are you taking us? What will you do to us when we get there? Pull down that damn shade, no peeking. You can't see out, and no one can see in to see what's happening. train is filled with fear. Some of these women have husbands who are serving in the U.S. Army already, for Christ's sake. We are as American as you. We are true blue and faithful. You'll see, we'll go. We won't mind being put in prison for 2 or 3 or 4 years. We don't care about losing everything. You can go ahead, pay cents on the dollar for my farm. Steal our crops in the field after we leave. All that we worked so hard for. It's okay, it's okay. Our store, our house, the furniture that Grandpa made by hand. Just take what you want after the train takes us away. Of course, there's no air on trains in 1942. Does God even know where the hell this train is going? Deported to the sticks somewhere? Even if you're sick or have a little baby or a son in the middle of college, you go, go, go! Choo, 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 choo! To the mountains, to the swamplands, to the deserts, to die from heat. God bless America, our home, sweet home. Our home is gone. There's Dad. Dad's on this train. Dad's blood pressure is too high for the Army to take him. His eyes are too weak to shoot a gun. The U.S. Army grabbed his little brother Jack, though, right at the train station. He's headed for military intelligence, MIS. Uncle Jack gets to take another train going another way. He ends up a 40-year U.S. Army man. A career with benefits. Sweet. Destination, the swamps of Jerome, Arkansas, where the snakes slither out at night. Dad has not yet spied Lily-O, his future wife, my future mom. He doesn't know he will be my dad. He's on the same train as Mom, who doesn't know she's going to be my mom. It's my life to be right on track. Dad doesn't mind leaving California. That family restaurant was too much work. And his dad's mean. He's a skinflint miser. The lawyer's about to steal the whole thing anyway. Dad doesn't care. Maybe he can just sit and play bridge in that camp all day with his buddies. Put this guy in the kitchen. He owned a restaurant in California. He can cook. Oh no. Poor Dad. More cooking. Only now it's for 8,500 people, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But there's pay, $17 a month. Okay, anything you say, Mr. President. Dad is right on track to his great concentration camp romance. Chase that college gal, Lily-O, round the barbed wire fence. She can't run very far, surrounded by swamps, barbed wire, guards in the tower. He can catch her. There's Dad, one of 120,000 Japanese American people, whoosh, whoosh, off the west coast into the middle of America. I know. I would not even be here if Mom and Dad had never been put in that concentration camp in the swamps of Arkansas. Am I a lucky duck or what? So when I was little, for just about my whole life, I was a porch sitter. I learned a lot sitting on our front porch stoop as a kid, 10 stairs up, safely looking down on Winchester Street, where I lived on the near west side of Chicago. Malcolm X Junior College now covers Winchester Street, where my parents' 3-story boarding house for men once stood. The Japanese American men were in kind of a way station. Released from the concentration camps, they were waiting in our house to be drafted while their background checks worked out and they took their physicals and stuff. When I was growing up, I thought I was just like all the other kids on the street. Italian, maybe. I didn't know. I didn't everyone in my house was Japanese American. I just sat on our front porch, watching the world come out of its cocoon a little at a time. I love watching those caterpillars. There were these big, fat, lime green ones. Do you remember them? They kind of lumbered along like dinosaur toes on the loose. Sometimes kids stuck them with sticks until their insides oozed out of them. Here they had made it through their whole life cycle from eggs, only to be stabbed to death for no reason. I stayed in my cocoon longer than most kids. It was safer that way. You could avoid kids with sticks who would stab you in the gut for no reason. But at dusk, I loved sitting on my top step looking at the row of green operating room lights atop Cook County Hospital a few blocks away. The ghostly limelights on the top row of the Vanilla Milk Cook County Hospital were like go lights beaming out to me. Don't worry, Connie. You will be all right. Everything will be just fine. But once, one of the kids in my neighborhood said to me, "My dad says you and your dad are spies, and you go to Tokyo on weekends and you report on us." I was confused. I'm 6. I don't speak Japanese. What do I have to report? Caterpillars? So I went inside and I told my dad what the kid had said. Well, this boy's dad was our precinct captain. And in those days, on the near west side of Chicago, the precinct captain came around and gave everyone cash for voting Democratic. I thought that was the way voting worked. In one election, Mom volunteered to work at the polling place. That's when the precinct captain came up to our house and screamed at our front door something like, "No Jap or rat is going to sit in this ward's polling place." My dad had been an amateur boxer in school. He was already mad about what the precinct captain's son had said to me. Dad came charging out on the front porch and decked the guy. He fell with a thunk with the one punch. I was terrified. There was our precinct captain laying on our front porch, and he wasn't moving. I thought, maybe he's dead. Dad would go on trial for murder. They'd put him in prison or something. But the guy started moving. And he got up, and he dusted off his pants, went down the stairs. And what was kind of strange was that he was really nice to us after that. I saw him having a beer with Dad in the tavern one night. That's just the way things were on Winchester Street where I grew up. Things were settled right there on the spot and taken care of. So, my grandma, came to America by boat, not a train. It was an immigrant journey, quite roundabout too. Komachi was a Japanese Catholic, headed for Peru with her husband Shujiro when she was stopped in her tracks by his sudden death. He was working in the hot sun trying to earn more money to continue their journey when he had a heart attack in a California apricot field. Left with 3 kids, my mother Lily, a son Key, and a baby girl Kazu, who was born in San Francisco. Grandma never did make it to Peru and lived the rest of her life in America. Grandma's travels took her all the way from the balmy southern island of Miyazaki, Japan, where the Jesuits had converted the people to Catholicism. She was a devout Catholic never failed to cross herself when she walked in front of a church. A lot of churches in Chicago, any church. She went from California to the concentration camp in Arkansas, to my parents' boarding house in Chicago, and finally to her last home in Fresno, California, where she died in 1964. During all these travels and life upheavals, she held on to one object. This military medal. It was given to her as a young surgical nurse during the 1904 Russian-Japanese War. She was in her 20s, and it was the highlight of her young and vibrant years as a highly skilled and competent combat nurse. Maybe it was a reminder of a narrow escape from a restrictive life in a rigid society. To me, it's a symbol of Grandma's wanderlust and a memento of the adventurous woman who kept it pinned to her heart for her whole long life. My grandma was a hurricane, a force of nature. She kept this medal pinned inside her blouse, despite the danger of being accused of not being a loyal American by holding on to this Japanese medal. It's engraved with a bird and a golden crown, and having it in my possession makes me strong. And maybe someday we'll do the same for my nieces, fourth generation Japanese American, who I hope will treasure this medal as I have. So, one day, my mother says to me, "You should get out of bed, stop sleeping so much, do some good in the world, make it a better place. You know, your father's mother was descended from the samurai. Her blood runs in you." I inherited samurai blood? What did that even mean? So I thought, maybe I should cultivate my warrior ancestry, but I need to know more about it. So I went to an old ramshackle Buddhist temple in the neighborhood where the small ragtag troop practiced the ancient art of Kendo fighting with bamboo swords called shinai and following the way of the warrior. We meet once a week. They are all men and me. Our teacher, Sensei Miyazaki, accepts me in the group, even though I couldn't even count to 10 in Japanese. I wasn't off to a good start with these guys. But I worked hard, and I practiced at home by striking my mother's seamstress mannequin, which was on wheels, up and down the hallway. Hey! 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 After a while, I thought I was getting pretty good. And that's when it happened. Our teacher announced that this Kendo group was coming from Tokyo University to compete against U.S. groups all over the United States. He said he would choose a few of us who would be pitted against the visiting team in demonstration matches, and he himself would end the competition by competing against the head of the Tokyo group. I got really excited. And of course, I wanted our team to beat the sushi out of those guys. The winter went by quickly, and we started practicing every night instead of just once a week. But in the end, Sensei didn't pick me to compete against any of the Tokyo warriors. I was a little disappointed, but I understood. We had to win and put up only our best people on the tournament day. And that spring, the day of the big competition came. It was held in a big, cavernous high school gym where sounds echoed off the walls. Our Chicago group was lined up on the highly polished wood floor 30 minutes ahead of time, waiting for them. Then I heard this strange, low, relentless rumbling. Boom, boom, boom. The rumbles grew louder and louder. And they came with this kind of beast-like grunting or growling that kept coming towards us. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, the double doors of the gym flew open with a loud bang as they hit the metal door stops, which flew up in the air. Wham! And in marched what I thought today would be a relentless precision line of Darth Vaders with black helmets and heavy metal and what looked like full body armor. These guys were clearly the masters of the universe, and no doubt about it, we were the minions. Make that the mini-minions of the Kendo world. And they'd already gotten the psychological edge on us. The slaughter ahead was certain. Our people went down one after another and another. I was devastated. And then it came time for our two teachers to go at it. Our man, Miyazaki, was shorter than the much taller, younger, kind of good looking, straight back sensei warrior from Japan. It wasn't exactly like David and Goliath, more like Mr. Magoo meets Buzz Lightyear. After a total defeat, well, things were never the same at practice in our home dojo. Sensei Miyazaki seemed to take sadistic pleasure in bouncing these newbie little boys off the wall, or lording it over the rest of us by getting some little kid in a headlock and rolling around on the floor. I decided that being brave, helping people, performing good deeds, fighting for what's right, did not have to be based on physical strength or some ancient prowess with a flashy sword. But I did pick up one little hint. You have to let bad people know you're there. So I went on to be an ad writer for 20 years. I fell into the job by answering this tiny ad in the Chicago Tribune that I clipped out one day when I was, well, postgraduate and pre-starving. The ad said that the American Association of Ad Agencies, the 4As, was looking for writers of color to color their copy? I don't know. At this time, in the 1960s, no one, including me, thought at all about this political correctness business, except I do remember that a certain commercial that ran all the time on TV all day kind of gave me this irky feeling in the pit of my stomach. At the end of every Riceland rice commercial, this little ochre-colored cartoon guy with buck teeth wearing a coolie hat sing-song the company jingle. It's very nice, it's Riceland. Boom! A gong fell on his head and whacked him. His eyes crossed and he fell over in a daze with stars above him. I hated that spot. Why did he have to be knocked out? Exactly what is very nice. What does that mean? Where the hell is Riceland anyway? I looked at the package. Arkansas. I should know. So I called the number in the ad, which I later heard that over 400 colored folks had called before me. A man named Frank Drayton answered the phone and said, Are you black? No, I said. Well, are you white? No. Well, what are you? And why in hell do you want to get into the ad biz? I said the first thing that came into my head, I'm Japanese descent, and I wanted to get into the ad biz to find out why it's very nice in Rice Land. There was total silence. Then Frank starts banging on his desk, laughing uproariously, about to collapse on the floor. Okay, you're in, Connie. And 25 of us would-be ad writers were accepted into the 4A's training program. Every Monday night, we had to find our way to a different ad agency on Michigan Avenue. Leo Burnett on Randolph in Michigan, Foot Cone and Belding at 401, J. Walter at 875, and in the end, only 2 of us finished the class. If you failed to create a campaign for an assignment, you were out. If you were late, you were out. Or if you had attitude or broke any of their other rules and requirements, out. Only 2 of us graduated, me and Ozzy. Ozzy was an art director, and the 2 of us went on to become the oddest team in the ad biz. Before there was an odd couple. Me in my jeans and a silk blouse, black bangs across my head looking like I was 12. And the 2 of us entering Ricardo's, every head turned and stared at us from the bar. On my first interview, the creative director looked over my writing samples and said, yeah, you're really good, you're terrific. I beamed. But as I see it though, you got 5 strikes against you. 5 strikes? I thought 3 strikes and you're out. The ad man, the honcho, says, well, you're short, overweight, soft-spoken, a minority woman. Like, that's okay. I went down the street and found a better job. I started out at J. Walter Thompson, went on to Foot Cone, Leo Burnett, and other big top shops in town. Well, my dear friend Ozzy, tall, elegant, chocolate-colored Ozzy, moved on to the big time, Madison Avenue, New York, New York. I guess I was the only Asian woman writer at J. Walter. And as my career went on, I was usually the only woman in the group as well. But I never noticed. I'd like to think that maybe I had an influence on the group's attitude toward Asian people. I made a lot of friends who were just like me. Sort of ornery, defiant, and, well, different. But one day, at work, the account executive at the ad agency comes into my little office. I didn't like him too well. He was kind of sleazy. And Brad says, well, I want to take our biggest client out to lunch and tell them about our creative team and their interests on the weekends. Everyone knows at work that I take a class in Kendo fighting. So tell me, says Brad, trying to write this down on his yellow pad, exactly what is it you learn from fighting with those stick things? Does it teach you anything about business? Does it mess with your head? What exactly do you learn from that? Well, Brad, I said, the thing about Kendo is it teaches you to kill someone instantly. A single blow, right down the center of the head. So as not to cause your enemy any undue pain. Poor Brad. He slowly backed out of my office and ran down the hallway. I smiled. He was scared to death of me. I realized right then I'm a woman warrior too, and not someone to be pushed around or spoken to with disrespect, ever. Then, when my little niece was born, I just knew that April would carry on the woman warrior spirit in our family. You see, when she was just a little preschooler and I was the babysitter, doting auntie for the day, she really surprised me. This smelly drunk kind of staggered over to her and patted her on the head. Wow, I panicked. Should I pull her away or pick her up and run with her? Will I make her afraid of men for life? I didn't want to scare her. But I didn't need to worry. While I was deliberating, my budding warrior little niece, April, calmly looks the man straight in the eye and says, "Excuse me, I'm not allowed to let anyone touch me that I don't want touching me, and I don't want you touching me." Well, she took care of him by herself. She didn't need my help. My warrior niece, a fourth-generation Japanese-American go-get-em girl. She already knew how to handle this masher on her own. You can't buy that kind of chutzpah. Lily-O would be mighty proud. Speaking of Lily, I think I've inherited a certain wariness about, officials and authority and rules from Mom and Dad. After all, they met each other in that concentration camp. When she was growing up, was Mom afraid of the guard at the public swimming pool in California? When she was a kid, if you were of Japanese descent, you had to swim at the end of the day in Fresno, when the water was filled with the sweat and the pee and the spit of more privileged kids. Maybe Mom was afraid of the ballet teacher who wouldn't let her take ballet lessons with the rest of her class. She had to wait till the end of the week in a separate class for her and her Japanese-American friends. When she was released from Jerome, Arkansas, the FBI warned her she was not to congregate or mix with other people of Japanese descent in Chicago, to lay low, not speak Japanese, don't act Japanese, don't do anything different, don't do anything Japanese. In other words, blend in. Don't call attention to yourself. Do not make waves. Fit in. She was probably aghast at being alone in Chicago, which she called a gangster town. Her mother, my grandma, was eventually allowed to return to her house in Fresno. And according to my mom's FBI file, I read that she was released on a temporary permit to look for work in Chicago, but nobody would hire her. She was a college graduate and couldn't do anything. And she probably thought of herself as something of an intellectual. She'd recite poetry, Browning and Longfellow at the drop of a hat. She painted and she loved art and music. I guess no one wanted a college girl, a thinker, on their assembly line. This was bad. Without a job, she'd have to return to the camp. But I turned the page and I read, she married Dad at City Hall in Chicago. He had been after her still after their camp days. Was it a marriage of convenience? Happenstance? Who knows? Soon after that, my parents ran the sporting house which housed these Japanese American men after they had come out of the camp. And sometimes the men, and they were only men, would want to borrow a dime from me to call their girlfriends or a quarter to take a bus downtown. I collected coins from pop bottles on the street, so I was always good for change. So I waited on the steps on payday to make sure they would pay me back. And then I was so surprised. Some of them gave me more money back than they had borrowed. Wow! I was amazed they would do that, and really happy. Bullheaded, That was the word Mom would use for my labor union activist dad, who was like a bull sometimes, charging into the fray, whenever and wherever he could find one. "You are just like your father," my mother would say when she was mad at me. But I think back all these years later, how Mom would only take us to a Japanese dentist in Chicago, or a Japanese optometrist, or a doctor who had a Japanese last name. Dad would say, "Where do you find these people from?" Traveling with 2 kids all the way from our West Side boarding house, all the way to the South Side on the L, or all the way north on 2 buses. Dr. Kikarashi, Dr. Nobe, Dr. Nakayama. Was Mom afraid that the others who weren't Japanese would hurt her children, mistreat us, give us substandard care? Yeah, Mom and Dad had to watch out for my brother and me in hostile times. But we had fun. We blissfully played on the street with all of our Italian, Polish, Chinese friends, Russians. We were hardly aware we were different. We blended in and got along. Just what the FBI had ordered. "I just didn't want you to grow up to be afraid of people," said Mom to me. "You would always be the only one in any group, so you have to be comfortable in your own skin." I didn't fully get at the time what Mom was saying to me. Of course I'm not afraid of people. Why should I be? And up until 5 years ago or so, I wasn't even interested in the concentration camps until I went to that Alphawood Gallery Foundation show. Then they came for me. I walked through the exhibit and I looked at the life-size photos of people who looked like me, standing in line with their suitcases, boxes tied with string, as young American soldiers with guns stood guarded over them by the train. I was asked to join a writing workshop there, and week after week after week went by. I sat surrounded by these giant pictures, and it finally hit me how awful it must have been for Grandma and Mom and Dad to be uprooted from all they had worked for in California. That show changed my heart. But I have something to tell you before I finish. I believe that Mom was a spy, or for sure, she was an FBI informant. Because now that I have time to think about it, how did Mom and Dad get put in charge of this boarding house on the West Side, with all these men who were coming out of camps and going into the U.S. Army? And then I met this man at the Then They Came For Me exhibit, and he asked me, "How did you get a house?" Nobody would even rent an apartment to us. We couldn't afford a house. How come you were living in a house? I don't know. It's true. Later, Mom and Dad somehow got to buy that boarding house. And she sometimes sent me upstairs to see what the guys were doing, to spy on them as they slept on the floor, 5 at a time, taking turns going to work, biding their time before being drafted. I was working downtown one day. My mother calls me at Leo Burnett. "I do not want to be buried way the hell out in the sticks with all those other Japanese people that they want me to be by. They said we were not to congregate. I am not congregating. I want to be buried right in the center of the city, in Graceland Cemetery." Oh, Mom, they don't like Japanese people in Graceland Cemetery. "Just meet me down there at lunchtime." I went down there, and when I got there was the salesman writing up her order, nodding his head, selling her just the spot she wanted. Mom was no pushover. She taught 4th grade on 18th Street in Pilsen. I saw her handle those kids the way she handled my brother and me, with toughness and humor. She was funny. Her last words before she died, "Never leave me." She whispered in the hospice in this raspy voice, "Well, Connie, if I had it to do all over again," I said, "Yeah, Mom. If I had it to do all over again, I'd have all Danish modern furniture." And the plot that Mom picked was no ordinary gravesite. It is overlooking Potter and Bertha Palmer's elaborate sarcophagi in the middle of this fancy island moat with water around it. Yeah, if the FBI had to pick someone to be a spy, you'd never expect them to pick my mom. She was a woman warrior in disguise before her time, maybe for all time. She was soft-spoken, mild-mannered, with a degree from USC, but she never missed a beat. Oh, I have to catch the train.